Hello Internet, it's Tech Guy here with another video. This video is my top 5 most anticipated smartphones for 2015, so pretty self-explanatory. Let's get into it. Before I go into the video, I just want to go over a quick disclaimer. I currently own an iPhone 5S, and it was my first smartphone. I may possibly consider signing up for an Android smartphone and turn, say, my iPhone 5S into what I guess you could say a glorified iPod Touch, in the sense of what the iPhone 5S has over the iPod Touch is more processing power, it's got a substantially better camera, and the fingerprint sensor and stuff like that just sells me on the idea of turning it into a glorified iPod. This is all when my contract expires later this year, or I may stick with my iPhone 5S depending on the costs of upgrading, etc. I am looking at the possibility of switching over to Android. I'm not confirming anything yet, obviously. I'm just trying to keep my options open and all that in terms of cost, and the fact that I'm doing mobile application development and all that, and I haven't got an Android device to run stuff on, and the Android simulator is absolutely horrible, and also the advantages of having software features like Android 5.0 Lollipop and the features in that over iOS and things like that. So I've just got all these things going through my head at the moment as to what I may possibly do in the future. And this video is based on what I believe will be the most talked about phones and what I personally want to see in each smartphone. The order is not too strict, but it is sort of more than just a loose list, if you catch my drift. So let's get into it. And number 5 is the Nexus 6 2015 edition. So the Nexus 4 and Nexus 5 were massively popular for being a stock Android device. The Nexus 6 was released and it is a killer phone, but it does have a few flaws compared to its predecessors. Most importantly, it has a larger body than the iPhone 6 Plus, which the iPhone 6 Plus does have large bezels, even though it has a 5.5-inch screen. The other thing is that the Nexus 6 has a 5.96-inch screen. Yes, it does have on-screen buttons, so it doesn't have like a separate home button or anything like that that's off the screen. So it's probably similar screen size if you take into account the buttons on something like the Samsung Galaxy Note 4. But the whole footprint of the Note 4 is obviously smaller than the Nexus 6. And also, in regards to the Nexus 6 2014 edition, it costs about 50% more than the Nexus 5 at relative storage configurations and all that, roughly translated in Australian dollars. So to address this, I hope they bring out an updated Nexus 6, but also a smaller 5-inch version, maybe call it like compact or something like that, because Sony's been going down that route recently, but also have a smaller 5.0-inch version that has 2015 specs inside of it, because there's been a lot of thing, dare one say, with the iPhone route of there's been a 4.7-inch and 5.5-inch model, but there was no 4.0-inch model of that, and a lot of people say, well, I'll upgrade if there's a 4.0-inch iPhone with the most up-to-date specs in it, but that's a whole other story. I guess you could say the same thing applies to all of these phablet phones and phones like the Nexus 6 that are coming out at the moment. So I'm hoping to see the fact that they would include something like a 64-bit processor, maybe the Snapdragon 810 from Qualcomm, an updated camera, more storage due to the fact that Google is so anti-expandable storage for Nexus devices, just like Apple is on the iPhone and the iPad and that, and better battery life because you can't complain. Everybody wants better battery life, obviously. So that's basically what I want to see from the Nexus 6 in 2015. Whether or not it will be called the Nexus 6 or something entirely differently. They can't call it the Nexus 7 because they've already had 2 revisions of that tablet, which I believe no longer exists anymore because it was superseded with the Nexus 9. But I've honestly got no idea what they're going to call it, but I'm just calling it Nexus 6 2015 for now. So I'm really looking forward to that because of the pure stock Android and all that. But the thing with stock Android is that it just has the features that come with that version of Android and nothing else. So what's another phone that's similar to the Nexus 6 but has all of these extra features? May I say the Samsung Galaxy Note 5, which, yes, the Note 4 is the current one out now. The Note lineup that Samsung started in 2010 had set the trend for what smartphones are now today, hence the Nexus 6. From my point of view, the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 is a really good phone if you are into the whole concept of phablets and all that, and you especially like to doodle with the pen and all that. But to be honest, it's let down by TouchWiz. I personally have never liked the heavily skinned look of TouchWiz, even on my mum's Samsung Galaxy S3 and my sister's Samsung Galaxy S4, which they got that because they were cheaper and contract reasons and all this sort of stuff. But I've never been a personal fan of it. I've always liked the look of stock Android, but I have been looking into alternatives in terms of launchers, so I've been understanding the concept of what launchers are and that. So there's Nova Launcher, which, if you don't know of it, do Google it or look it up on the Google Play Store if you do have an Android device. But it is a good feasible alternative to TouchWiz if it doesn't remove the phone's specific features. So I'm talking things like the S Pen and things like the split screen multitasking, pop-up window view, and all these other little various things. If it doesn't remove that, but it changes the look of the home screen and all that to more what you want, I'm all for it. And also in the notification center, or whatever it's called on Android, you know what I mean, when you pull down from the top. This is on my list because the two main flaws I have found in the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, and I guess they came out before both of these were released, technically speaking, or enough time for them to integrate them in, was the fact that it doesn't have the Snapdragon 810 octa-core 64-bit processor, which doesn't make it a very future-proof phone in the sense of, presumably in the future Android will eventually support just 64-bit only processors, but it's another story of whether or not Samsung would update the devices and all that. But 64-bit applications and all that are meant to be computing a lot more power than a 32-bit phone, which is probably the vast majority of Android smartphones out there at the moment. And also because it doesn't have Android 5.0 Lollipop, probably because they're trying to figure out how to heavily skin it and all that, but more on that later. They could add an Ultra HD or 4K, whatever you want to call it, screen, which is 3840 pixels by 2160, or 4 times the resolution of Full HD 1080p. But to be honest, I don't see the point. It has roughly 44% more pixels than a Quad HD screen, which is currently on the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, which is 2560 by 1440. But there's a lot of people on the internet that are saying, on these tech review websites and that just a good 1080p screen on a 5.5-inch screen is really as far as you need to go. You shouldn't need to go any higher than that in terms of specs, because you're not really going to see any difference. And I agree. But going Ultra HD, yes, it's eventually going to happen, but I seriously don't see the point of them doing it, especially with all the battery life issues that are currently happening at the moment. So just having a screen with a higher resolution is only going to kill the battery quicker, unless you have a bigger battery inside it. But you can't really do that unless you make the phone even bigger, and people aren't going to want the phone any bigger than what the Note 4 is, so presumably the Note 5 will remain roughly the same. I'm mostly happy with everything else that the Note 4 currently has, as long as they carry it over to Note 5 and improve upon that. Then there's other little things here and there, but it's nothing really to be worried about. So moving on in this list, at number 3 is the little brother, which will be the Samsung Galaxy S6. Project Zero, which is what Samsung is basically saying, or as it's heavily rumoured on the internet, is basically the project name in regards to Samsung releasing the Samsung Galaxy S6, so it's a project dedicated to just that one phone. It may be Samsung's most important project within the last few years. I would almost go as far to say it's the most important since the S3. And the aim is to completely start from scratch when building the S6, due to the S5 sales being roughly 40% lower than what Samsung expected. Obviously, your aim is to get better than what you expected, but Samsung got 40% less than what they anticipated to make in sales, which is definitely not good for a company like that in the tech world and all this stuff, especially for shareholders and all that. So the S6 specs that I want to see to sell me on this phone, also from the fact that it's cheaper over the Note 5 or Note 4 or whatever you want to compare it to, because it's like, say, the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. Well, the 6 Plus is obviously more because it's a phablet to get you to go up to that one. It's the same thing with the S6 and the Note 5 into 2015 when they're released. But what I want to see from these devices, it's rumoured to have somewhere between a 5.1 inch, which is currently what's on the S5, anywhere up to a 5.5 inch display, which yes means it will be a phablet, with a quad HD screen of 2560 by 1440. I hope, personally, it's a more towards the 5.5 inch screen size, because I'm more inclined to go for a larger screen in terms of being like a phablet and all of that, because of all these little software enhancements and the fact that you've got the back button down the bottom right corner of the device instead of top left in all of these iPhone applications. And even though it's not a main button, and the fact you can swipe from the side and all of that, there's just little things here and there that make it better to have a phablet as an Android phone over having an iOS phablet, especially with the iPhone 6 Plus and all of that. It's also rumoured to have the Snapdragon 810 octa-core 64-bit processor. That is, until all of these rumours have been going around saying that there's been a lot of overheating issues in regards to the device heating up too much with this processor inside. So what Samsung could alternatively do is put in their Exynos 7420 octa-core 64-bit processor, which, yes, it's an octa-core chip, yes, it's a 64-bit processor, but it's not a Qualcomm chip. And the reason a lot of people are not so happy about this rumour, and yes, it's all rumours, so take it all with a grain of salt and all that, especially with the fact that the LG G Flex 2 has the Snapdragon 810 inside of it, is the fact that a lot of applications and software that's out there for the Android platform is more designed to work specifically for the Qualcomm processors to get the most power, processing power and all of that out of it. So I really hope that the Snapdragon 810 is in it, but if the Samsung Exynos 7420 is in it, then I'm really going to have to look into all the other features to see if it's worthwhile doing or not. But that's almost a deal breaker in itself, is the processor, based on the rumours. Probably that and the display. But what I also want to see is an improved fingerprint reader, just like it was from the Note 4, so basically carry that across. Yes, it's swiping instead of placing your finger on the Touch ID home button on the iPhone 5S, but it's better than no fingerprint reader, I guess. Samsung Galaxy Note 4 pop-up window feature is a really, really cool idea, and the fact it has like a single-handed mode and all that in the Note 4, especially if they're going to go for a 5.5-inch display. I really hope that they add all of these software enhancements into the S6 without requiring the S Pen at all. And I hope to see at least a 3000 mAh battery, which the S5 has a 2800-ish mAh battery, and also the inclusion of fast charging with getting 50% battery in 30 minutes, especially being the size of the phone it is. Also, a 20 megapixel rear-facing camera, which would be an upgrade from the 16 megapixel camera, and megapixels aren't everything, so the point I'm trying to make is they could be adding stuff like optical image stabilization, or OIS for short, or a lot of people, like John Redder just says, OIS. So it would be really good for them to add optical image stabilization and all of these features, but it's more take everything with a grain of salt until the time comes. Now at number 2 is one of the biggest competitors. I'm sure if you've watched my previous video as to what I'm most looking forward to for phones, is the HTC One M9, and there's been a lot of rumours on it ever since I did that video. So the HTC One M8 was crowned the best overall smartphone of 2014 by Marques Brownlee, or MKBHD on YouTube. Definitely go check him out, and he's basically on every other social network that you can think of, pretty much under the name MKBHD. It isn't really that surprising due to its non-heavily skinned software, metal design, front-facing subwoofer speakers. It's all really great for what it has, and I guess Apple's taken design cues from them in the sense of the antenna break lines on the back of the phone seem to look similar to what it is on the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. The areas that they're going to improve the HTC One M8 for the M9 include areas that I'm most interested in. They're probably going to either have like the M9 and like the M9 Plus, in the sense of like the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. That's like the rumour it is at the moment. They'll probably have a different naming scheme. But if they do go down this route, the smaller one, which is the same size as we've all come to know to love, is probably going to retain its 5.0-inch 1080p screen. Or what they could do is bump it up to either 5.2 or 5.5 inches with a QHD display, but I'm more inclined to say that's probably going to happen for the Plus model, especially if it's 5.5 inches. I don't see them just releasing an M9 with a 5.5-inch screen. I mean, it's possible, I wouldn't rule it out, but I'm more inclined to say that's probably not going to happen, especially with a lot of people saying that all the bezels around the M8 at the moment is already thick enough as it is, even though you've got the subwoofer speakers and that on the front of it. The Snapdragon 810 processor is also rumoured to be in it. Android 5.0 Lollipop with most likely HTC Sense UI 7.0's skin over the top of it. The 6th version of that was in the M8. 3GB of RAM, up from 2. A larger battery, so maybe something like a 2840 mAh battery, based on rumours, up from 2600 in the M8. A 20 megapixel rear-facing camera, which is up from the 4 ultra-pixel camera, which a lot of people have been saying, including Marques Brownlee himself, was the biggest drawback of the M8, was the fact that the camera was using this ultra-pixel route and all that. To put it simple, it just wasn't good. So it seems like HTC will be ditching that for the next phone. They could also be including 32 and 64 gig storage capacities. Obviously, it will have expandable storage inside of it. Based on the rumoured leaks, they might move the power button from what was in the top left, I believe, for the M7, to the top right of the M8, onto the side of the M9, which would be really good. And the other good thing about it is, on Samsung phones, you've got the volume on like the left side of the device and the power button on the right side of the device, but when you go to lock the phone with the power button, you're most likely going to hit the volume rocker. But if you keep it all on the same side in terms of volume and the power switch lock button and all that, it's going to make it a lot more consistent and easier to handle, and quite frankly, looks a little bit better. They could be adding extra software features like split-screen multitasking, similar to Samsung smartphones and all that, because as far as I'm aware, if you do know that any of these features are in the M8, please leave a comment below or tweet me at TechGuy1212. As far as I'm aware, none of these sort of real heavy multitasking features are in any of the HTC phones at the moment, and I really hope they do steal that, I guess you could say, from the Samsung smartphones. And also possible addition of a fingerprint sensor in the HTC One M9 Plus as like a selling feature to get that over the M9 normal size, I guess you could say. And it could possibly act like a Touch ID sensor in the sense of placement of the finger instead of swiping it like Samsung's fingerprint reader. So this would have to be overall my most anticipated smartphone for 2015 that has Android software on it. Now you all know me fairly well, and I'll just go to it. It's iPhone 6s Plus is the most anticipated smartphone of 2015, and it's no surprise since I'm currently an iPhone 5s user, and my contract will expire around the time when the iPhone 6s and 6s Plus, God I hate that name, will eventually come out. The other reason this is at the top of this list is because the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus were massive updates, mostly the screen size, obviously that's what made them a massive update, but the fact they've got the A8 processor, they've got a lot better battery life. The iPhone 6 Plus battery was substantially better. I've heard people were getting more than double the battery life they would out of an iPhone 5s or something like that. and things like the barometer, Apple Pay, and all these little enhancements and all that made it the best iPhone ever, which I completely agree. But it's a matter of knowing what Apple will bring out next. I'm expecting the build design and the screens, in terms of size and the resolutions and all that, to remain exactly the same to reduce fragmentation yet again for developers out there and all that for the iOS platform, just to keep it consistent. And I reckon they've decided on it now, and they're going to try and keep it that way for many years to come. But the following changes I'm expecting is an updated processor, possibly to the A9, and even possibly with a quad-core processor if they can figure out their power management and stuff like that. I mean, Android phones are going to octa-core. Why can't iPhones go to quad-core? I mean, they're doing tri-core as far as I know for the iPad Air 2. Presumably they could go quad-core for both the iPhone and the iPad in 2015. iOS 9 is probably the most important thing in relation to these new iPhones, because they're not radical design changes at all, that the operating system itself generally gets a more substantial update, because iOS 7 was a massive update. I expect the same thing to basically happen with iOS 9 as well, and there's a lot of customization features and stuff like that that I'm wanting to see, especially split screen multitasking. But I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can check it out on my channel. Before I changed my name to TechGuy1212, literally 1 or 2 videos before that, I did a top 10 iOS 9 predictions video, so definitely go and check that out, even though it looks slightly different to this video that you're watching at the moment. An updated camera with a higher megapixel count. It's even rumoured to have dual lenses at the back, so probably similar to the duo camera that's on the HTC M8, which they may get rid of that on the M9, but time will tell for that as well. And most importantly, in terms of these S updates, it seems like the pattern now is that it's going to have a better processor, it's going to have the next operating system, it's going to have a better camera, and they'll just add one new feature to sell you with that phone, even though the phone doesn't look any different. But they need to have one to sell the new phone, like Siri and Touch ID. Maybe they could do something like Force Touch technology, which has been heavily rumoured recently from the Apple Watch, but put it on the iPhone so it can detect the differences between a touch and a press, which is quite literally figuring out the force of which you put onto the display. So if you just tap it with your finger, literally tap it on and off, or if you place your finger on it, not just placing your finger on it, but putting even more pressure on it, the fact it can detect that, it could open up the expandability of what functionality they could put in the software in iOS 9 and what developers could do with it in the future. But basically, if the iPhone 6 and 6S Plus doesn't really sell me, then I'll be looking at Android phones and that, and if none of them really sell me, or they don't meet my expectations, if you really want to get that technical with it, I may just stick with the iPhone 5S for another year, but it's also down to costs and all this other things like that. It's not cheap upgrading your phone every 2 years, obviously, but I guess time will tell as to what I do. But I'm definitely interested in all of these phones coming out this year. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. The question for you, the audience, is: what is your most anticipated smartphone for 2015, and what does it need to have in it to get you to upgrade to it? So you can let me know by leaving a comment below, or on Twitter at TechGuy1212, or Google+. And if you enjoy this, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this in the future. So until next time, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you later.